Hi there, Randy Green here, and welcome to the explanatory podcast on the article The Matrix of Change. And we're going to do it on a very technological level this one, and that's why I put it out for free, because it's about time that humanity begins to orient their perception field towards what we could say the new horizon of science, which are called the higher order sciences. These sciences belong to the other realities that are adjacent to ours, that are behind the enclosure that used to be protected by the astral barrier. Now we just got the distortion field, which is quite extensive, and we got the artificial fourth dimension behind that one. And then we have got the frequency fence and the artificial fifth dimension. So it will be a while before humans, the ones that are ready, cleared their way through these levels that are connected to their physical form. And to be completely honest, the chances of all getting there is probably not that high, but some will. So this is for the some that will do it, that will succeed, and as well as some of the enhanced humans that are going to integrate themselves into our human forms in 50 years or so. But to begin that process, to allow for that integration process, that new quote unquote seeding, it is a pattern of change that needs to be created. And this is what the Matrix of Change is all about, this beginning to get the new sciences, because when you work with holographic realities, and I explain more about that in the background of the New Reality Program Course 1, which you have to buy. But this one I'll give out for free because it has a different purpose. This is where we begin seeding in on the level that the future humanities are going to perceive reality, work with the reality, as well as work with their societies, as well as how they govern their reality. And this has nothing to do with the Kardashev scale or anything like that, because that is just kind of what we call utilitarian or utilization societies, harnessing energy from where they destroy everything that they live on, so to speak. And humanity is also in the same process. I explained that in the background of the holographic new reality programs, that humanity is already in the process of harnessing its magnetic field. And I know this is not what science tells you. Sorry about that. This is not what science tells you. None of what I'm saying here is something that science will applaud and say, yes, that is correct. They will say, no, this is not how we understand things. This is not within our current paradigm. This is not what we have agreed on. This is not what the Society of Scientists have agreed on is the correct way of perceiving reality. But all sciences are a conglomerate of ideas and theories that, if they take hold, that means that a majority agrees that this is how it works. Well, then that is how it's going to work, or at least that's how we believe it works. And with that, we're not really questioning it. So when we begin talking about the future humanities, we need to create new frames of references, which is what the whole academy is all about doing. And this is also why I'm putting this one out as part of the free online courses, which if all things go in that direction, I will continue to do so, because the purpose of that one is to seed in the new ideas, which will not reach the same audience if I'm just doing it behind closed doors, as in course material that you can buy. Now, on the whole academy, I want to put in here, there is the whole change maker pillar. There are 3 pillars. There are the change maker pillar. Then there are the new whole projects, which are the next 10 years of work that I'll put in there, creating these new sciences. And then there are the future humanities. These are the 3 pillars. And since I already created what I call the Change Maker, where you begin with basic concepts, all of the courses are there for free, then you move into what we could say the more advanced level of the progression work, where you begin to work with the transition science courses, where you learn about the transformative energy system. And these 7 courses upgrade the current understanding of how to do energy work with the understanding that we have a holographic energy template behind our physical form that is imbued with consciousness units. And how does that work, and what is the purpose of it, and how does it work inside this solar system? Many of you have got teachings that belong to the crystalline Syrian bees, or you have got different forms of old Atlantean reconstructed models of what the old Atlanteans recirculated into our time wanted you to embark on, so they would get their pattern of change created by you utilizing it, although it was not for you. So now we're focusing on, okay, those of us who actually are here and are going to do the transition, what do we need to learn how to work with our holographic configuration and our consciousness potential so that we can follow with the upgrading steps of our reality as the network and the original density energies in the holographic network behind our physical reality upgrades and move out of the distortion fields, the artificial fourth, the frequency fence, and out of the artificial fifth, and move into what we could say the original density configuration of the outer domain where we're positioned. And how to get out of what we could say the distortion fields and the artificial fourth and the artificial fifth are explained in the advanced energy work videos or clearing work videos or podcasts I have made, of which there are 6, where you learn how to clear the old alien inserted technology and the technologically enhanced genetics and all of these things that are kept most stuck within the current type of reality. The last piece of the progression work are the 3 template science courses where I explain the consciousness units and the mind field that we are to develop. Along with that type of configuration, we have the vibrational field. That's the emotional field changed into the vibrational field, where we learn to administer energy and vibrate with code streams in our reality using the vibrational energies of our reality. When we talk about the radiation energies, this is imbued into our holographic energy system via the mind field or the perception field. It changes. It's a mind field where you have the patterns that are connected to complex information systems, but it becomes a perception field when it gets imbued with consciousness units from your template level. And that is where we begin to pull in our original consciousness potentials, and by that the original sciences behind our solar system and why we're here and what we're doing here, including our version of ancient history. I've given my version of my perception of ancient history in the perception log 1 to 6. So it's all built up that way. And then we go into the Changemaker material, 4 courses there, where plus free material, free podcasts, where you learn to work with these different forms of sciences of the holographic energy system, how to use it, what we could say psychologically to begin with, what is needed to change for becoming a human that can do the transition and then can transform and adapt into a different type of world where we are moving from order into more and more chaos. Absolutely no doubt, as we are, as the global society is harnessing the magnetic field energies, creating more distortion energies, as well as what we could say what is left of the fallen races in the artificial fifth and what is left of the para-universal matrix in the artificial fourth, and their attempt to get as much as they can before the door closes and our solar system begins its complete decay cycle. And that's some of the things that are in the template science course 4, the call outs, where those of us who have the ability to connect to the original reality field holographic teaching system have got the call outs telling we have now reached the momentum where this planetary setting, including its solar system, is now in evac. It's closing down. We had the sun call out, or the call outs for the closing down the sun in 2007. Took 15 years, reached here in June 2022. That was the last shield that were destroyed, and now the sun is beginning to bursting out what we would call decay energy or chaos energies, entropy energies, kinetic energies, where there's no order to it. It's not generating life anymore. On the contrary, it's beginning to destroy life. And that what happens when a sun has begun its decay cycle. And ours have, or has, even though science will tell you, oh, that's a long time before that happened. Yeah. things are not what science believes them to be. And this is a little bit where I want to go into the matrix of change and teaching you some of these very complex sciences. And most of you will hear new words you haven't heard before because we're creating new language. You will have difficulty in finding anything similar on the internet because there's not many working on this level yet. And it's not completely accurate. We are modulating it to the best of our abilities. Those of us are behind this. This is the future humanities I'm talking about. And where we can go, we have those of us who have viable genetics and are able to upgrade and work with our energy system as we're supposed to in the outer domain. We have two options. One is to follow the enhanced humans into the future humanities that will live within the solar system, but in what we call the original outer domain setting. So that's a transition into that. Or those of you who you can upgrade into the sixth dimension where you can reach the restoration programs that were put in as part of the original construction after the timeline event. All of these very complex sciences behind our reality field are explained both in the perception logs, but also in the progression work course material, where I take these 30 videos or podcasts and text material and explain in detail in context with our energy system and why we should do the work and why we should do the progression work and what we can achieve by doing so and how we administer that in our everyday life, how we change our ways, our nutrition, our type of education, the way we do work, how we do exercise, psychology, that's part of the change maker psychology, as well as the transition psychology, the high awareness lifestyle in total are covered now in the progression work, which is why I can begin focusing on, okay, what are the sciences? Because that's where I have my forte. That's the sciences. Although I am a psychotherapist and I am a healer and I am clairvoyant and I have been in contact with different groups of races during my work since 2004, working with the other realities. Now, of course, it was already part of my childhood, but not understood as it is now because the child brain is not capable of processing that type of information. But glimpses and bleed-throughs that seen in hindsight definitely tells me, okay, things were different for me. And I explained that in the perception logs as well. So that's kind of my personal history and my personal take on our collective history, because history will always be in the eye of the viewer, or the one that is looking into history will always be from his or her perception point within the holographic network and the timelines we have been connected to and the sciences we have been able to deal with. So no, it's no brainer to understand that the ones that had got further in the original pillar projects of our solar system within the 410 or the 511 pillar, especially the 511 pillar that goes with the fifth cycle, they would be enormously scientifically oriented. It was all about programs and different forms of, let's just call them developmental programs that would progress the consciousness units as well as the energy systems by creating what we could say programs, developmental programs that were run by imbued with different forms of technologies, both here and in the original progressive worlds, but they were different in the progressive worlds. Here they were also due to what we could say the less progressive universal structure that were created to support the D13 collective races that had not reached their highest potentials, and by that were technically not capable of following the elevation cycle of the D14 collective as we began it a long time ago. And that's the origin of the version of this sector as it is now. And that's why it's breaking down, because it was instigated for a specific purpose. And that purpose has been lost a long time ago, including the timeline event that crystallized and changed or solidified the original flexible features of the holographic radiation vibration units that composes all universal cycles. So this is the understanding that we have from the infinity fields. We have our consciousness potentials, which are recycled over and over and over again. There is no source, but people tend to call the infinity cycles or the infinity fields, which they are with consciousness potentials, as kind of being the source of all existence, but that is inaccurate. But let us just go with that. But the problem with using the idea of a source is that people quickly slip into personifying and anthropomorphic understandings of source as some kind of God figure, which is totally inaccurate. It's not a he, it's not a she, it's not anything to do with what we understand. That's the human projecting his or her perceptions of reality into an understanding that is in alignment with their comfort zone, as well as their psychological structure and their personal needs of some sort of comfort, some sort of loving, kind, caring something, because this world is so hard. So that's where my psychotherapeutic existential psychotherapy comes in, because that's the branch I have got my license within as part of a setting of group therapy, working with people direct. What are we doing? The existential approach, but also the experimental approach, as in whenever people bring something to the table, everything can be turned into some kind of psychological endeavor where we unravel the different emotional patterns. It doesn't really matter what people talk about. Everything has a point of origin. Everything is connected to some sort of pattern. So we already have these patterns within our emotional field and mental field. The problem is they are distorted and they are solidified, so they are not changeable. When we talk about patterns of change in the holographic world, they are very changeable. They change with the consciousness potentials that are imbued onto them. And by that, what we focus on, we become part of, and what we become part of, we give energy, and what we give energy, we begin to integrate, and it will imprint into our holographic energy system from where we become part of us. So we are all interconnected in that manner, not as the law of the one, which is, or the law of one, sorry, but the law of the one. The law of one is where we're saying, oh yeah, we're all unified because we share in the same fields. And that is also inaccurate, because each and one of us are vibrating on different subtle levels of energy, different holographic settings, different consciousness settings, different radiation and vibrational units are within our holographic energy system, and thereby we are different. We might be connected to the same fields, but the same fields are divided into sectors, into different groupings, into different lineages, into different ways of being, and we are not all of God. Yes, we all came from the infinity fields, but these consciousness potentials were put into the lineages and shared by many others in 12 different lineages, so they are not the same. So we are not all one, and we are not supposed to be one. But we are to work under responsibility of the law of the one, that if one can do it, others can do it too. So with me being the first of the many, for the highest good of the many, teaching you the sciences of your future, that should hopefully lead to a more peaceful world, because these sciences cannot be weaponized. They cannot be turned into destructive weapons, as all of the energies of the D13 collective have been utilized and been turned into over and over and over and over again. These D13 collective universal lineages we had in the previous universal over cycles, they led to a complete destruction, and there were very few of us that made it to the infinity realms of the core domain and crawled over, limping, halting, handicapped, into the D14 collective. And by that, we created some pretty strong ways of how we're going to unfold the D14 collective, or we could say the next set of 12 universal lineages within the D14 type of energy that's supposed to generate life force. And we chose to be part of a sector under the Ancient Ones that blasted through their universal cycles using what we could call a very highly ordered type of structures. Their universal structures and the way they engineered them are depending on what we call some really rigid laws of how to utilize energy, compared to the very loose laws of the D13 collective, which in the making of what we call individuality and the processes that were unfolding in the D13 collective lineages of the previous universal cycles, of which there were 10, they unfolded in all the worst way possibles, and we are seeing remnants of that within the first 10 what we call sectors of our universal structure, even though it has been rearranged due to the LPU, where we talk about the different stargates, as in, for instance, Stargate 10 or D10, the 10th dimension, Sector 10, and the races there, of which the top notch of that one are the Dracos. So the new ones in this sector were the D11 or Viger and D12 Lyra, and these are two different things, even though science keep telling you, oh, Viger is part of Lyra, the Lyra constellation. Nah, it's not. But let us just, because there's a barrier between, because the D11, they were part of the 511 pillar, whereas the D12 were part of the 612 pillar. The 612 is the one that goes into the core domain. The 511 is the one that focuses on developing what we call the inner domains, or the galactic level. So the core domain are the ones that are moving into, when they elevate, they are moving into the infinity cycle. So that's the top of everything, where we go out of the universal structures and back into the infinity fields with everything we have created and getting ready to be spawned out in new lineages from where we create new universal structures. But we also have a tendency to reuse what other races have done before us, because everything repeats itself, and the ancient ones have been going through the different collectives. And this one we positioned within their collective to make sure that there were some pretty stark laws coming in whenever someone transgressed or kind of moved beyond the law set of the universal cycles and the dynamics of the universal cycles. And there were some very specific laws of how do you actually create something so that it transform energy, transmute energy, and lift up everything that belonged to the D13 collective to be part of the D14. And if that were not possible, then it would be segregated. It would be pushed into its own type of sector, where it would continue the processes that it had begun, the trajectory, until it would reach what we call the outer domain, where it would then begin shedding off what was no longer viable, and that would be sucked into the abyss of the what we call the fallen cycles, which are unfortunately began as a remnant field of the D13 collective, or the previous universal cycles, of which there were 10, as I said, and we had a lot of wars and a lot of stuff was pushed in there. It was created by all of these wars. It wasn't there prior to that. So we're all struggling with the remnant energies of the past, and that's part of the clearing work, and that's what the D13 collective races, of which there are three prominent lineages, the dark ones, the technocrats, and the what we call the machine worlds. They are all using these D13 collective energies as well as what they can harness from the abyss of the previous earlier galactic wars, and have used them in different types of projects where they've been trying to recreate the forms they had in the previous universal cycle, because many of them are now either purely holographic in the artificial fifth, that's the dark ones, or they are technocratically imbued, they are living by different forms of technologies, or they are machines, have become machines. They are, of course, not androids as we understand. The metal is not metal. It is, as I explained in the previous two videos, something completely different, also built upon holographic principles. So it works in different ways that are aligning itself with the different gradient or scalar fields, if you like, of the holographic network that it takes part of. So with that little sum up here, so you kind of get where we are, and blasting through all of these very complex levels of information, which each and one is a pillar to understand on its own. And each one is one you need to master energetically, not just understanding linearly, as in you can repeat what I have said and use it in sentences, but actually are using that information to rebuild your holographic energy system on two levels: the radiation level, which goes with the mind field, perception field, when it's imbued with consciousness, doing the energy work and clearing of timelines, and learning to work with complex sciences to build your mind field. That's how it's built. And then the vibrational field that goes with clearing work and energy work and reconstruction work, that's connected to the heart field, where you learn to work with the chiasm and clearing your timelines and your past, which we could say are the extended version of the psychological work, which is why I began as a psychotherapist, and through my work with clients in healing and deep healing states, theta states, not regression, but me actually being able to push people in there energetically because my energy system is configured to operate there. We would in joint fields experience the past together. And with that, I began to unravel the sciences I have put into the progression work course material, combining the ability to self-heal, self-construct, and self-do energy work. Because there's no point in having healers doing it for you. You need to learn to do it yourself, because there's not always a healer available when shit hits the fan, is there? So you need to learn to deal with these things on the spot on your own. And that's what is the background idea and purpose of the progression work material. So you learn to do this on your own. So you have the psychological skills to withstand the pressure that it takes, so that you have the self-healing and energy work and clearing abilities, so that you can reconstruct your energy system, but also repair it, scan it, heal it, reconstruct it, modulate it, do whatever you need to do. You learn to work with the timelines, which gets you into the holographic reality fields, where you learn to understand how reality really is composed. You learn to go beyond the artificial fourth, the distortion fields of your subconscious level. That's part of the emotional field, 9 layers to be exact. You're only using 2 of them, 2 of the 9 layers of your emotional field. You're only using them now. So you have got 7 more to go in what we call the subconscious. And then you will get into the artificial fourth, where the alien inserted technology is for you to be cleared out. That's the typical regress races you will encounter there, the insectoids, the avians, the scavengers, and the low level of the mammals. And then you will move into the artificial fifth, where you'll begin to work with the galactic levels, where most of you will encounter what you have got left of Atlantis, because that's been reseeded into humanity since or during the stellar activation cycle, or as part of the stellar activation cycle, including some of the military projects, most of them having backdoors into the conglomerate under the Orion negative alien agenda. And with that, you are good to go and can move into your own personal history and what you are once you have moved your way through the different types of programs that have kept you stuck in the recirculation inside our reality field, which is called the enclosure. And it is, for some, a prison planet. For others, it is an enslavement planet. For others, it is a restoration program. For others, it is a shitty story due to bad choices. For others, they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time and got captured by the scavengers and brought here and traded off, etc., etc. So there is not just one function of this reality field or the enclosure. It has many different functions. But overall, it has been used as a genetic factory, a harvesting facility, as well as huge experimental labs for the different races around us that have had access to our reality field and has had connection points via the timelines and some of the original choices that humans inside this reality field did a long time ago with these races. Now, when we talk about how many are left of what we could say having viable genetics inside our reality field, understanding that 60% of humans are technically based upon what we call a clone template that is created specifically for some of the insectoid races and the avian races, so they could have a physical vessel inside this reality and not just as bugs and birds. They have the 3 Bs, bugs and birds and beasts. They needed a body, so they got the clone template for their convenience, and we have the human interface system with the biofield, emotional field, the mental field, which we all have. But when we go into the artificial fourth and fifth behind these bodies or clone templates, then you will see, well, they are probably not human. They are probably something else. And that's some of the things that most people will discover in their own pace when they're ready to do so. Then we got the 40% of, you now know there are the dark ones. You now know there are the machine wells. You now know there are the technocrats. And then we got 10% left of the original solar system humanities. that's about it. And since we were part of the original configuration behind the outer domain, and we're part of that, and we're connected to that, most of us that have that configuration have been harvested quite severely. So our clearing work is often 10 times worse than everybody else. But it is what it is. Those of us who do have viable genetics, since we are aligned with the original outer domain, and as that gets stronger, we will grow in strength and we will become more efficient in our clearing work, because the world we are part of actually works with us. But of course, if you're brought here as enslavement, under enslavement contracts, or you're brought here as a prisoner of war or whatever, you're not aligned with this reality field. You will be aligned with the different races that are now taking over your segment and your racial grids, and what was put in play into this reality field so that these races, these groups of aliens could exist here. And your energy work will probably be different. But it is with patterns of change and with all sorts of complex information systems that they can be adapted. They are holographic, so if you put on a specific consciousness unit to it, you can change it. You can transform it into something else. And that's what the consciousness units are all about. It's not about being conscious. Yeah, duh. Everybody's kind of have some sort of intelligence, some sort of mind, some sort of experience of their reality, whatever that means. It could be lesser and it could be more expanded, since all universal cycles are imbued with energy that is impressible. So you can impress your consciousness structure onto it, and you can bring it to life if you like. You can, if you are skilled at that, and if you're part of the Pleiadian projects, they experimented with plants, making them a sort of transformative life form that would exist, that's part of nature, which is why they kind of have some feature of intelligence, so to speak. They have DNA, which is connected to consciousness potentials. So they have the feature for it. But if people are not working with plants, they don't activate them. So what is activated in the plants are replication of its owner, or the ones that are working with them. And that was part of the idea of the plants of our nature, as the Pleiadians made it, that they would come and they would work with crop and plants, which is why they tried to teach humans, and instead humans turned it into food, right? But working with this as a way of upgrading the holographic network behind, as an extension of the original reality field, to undo the effects of the timeline event, that is, to undo the crystallization and the solidification that leads to entropy, which we know from science. What science doesn't know is that you, by your consciousness potential, can alter it, but they are working with it via machines because they use the quantum fields. The quantum fields are connected to both the dark worlds, but also the machine worlds, and the technocrats. They're using the quantum field. That's their insertion inside our reality field. So we need to get beyond the quantum field as well and get back into the holographic principles, where we learn to work with the holographic unity fields that we are part of, but that we impress and imprint with our consciousness potentials and who and what we are. And that's the law of the one in its more advanced level. That is, if you try to do that and you're highly contaminated, which happened with the dark ones because they got inverted due to the timeline event, their realities, even though they were light realities in the fifth cycle to begin with, because they had got third cycle energies and were imbued with a lot of very what we call negatively infused type of genetics from the third cycle of the previous universal cycle, their entire reality field turned dark, and they turned dark along with it, because as they got quote unquote inverted more and more, their holographic light system turned into dark light instead of bright light. So therefore, they changed by who they had become. And that is some of the effects of the timeline event, which is why in the Pillar Project, in the 511 Pillar, we work with what was left of the fifth cycle under the Sirian races for a very long time, until the Sirians themselves got the inversion into their holographic energy system, and it began to spread, and by that changed the Sirian realities into the different groupings that we now know of, the two main ones, the Sirian A's and the Sirian B's. The Sirian B's are the crystallines that are working to figure out the dark inversion energies, the dark light energies, trying to transform that, not succeeding very well. So they have aligned with the Orion Collective instead, because they don't know how else to survive. They need something that's bigger than them in the 8th dimension, where the Orion Collective has their point of origin, that's their segment. And the other ones, the Sirian A's, aligned themselves with what's left of the Pleiadians, but the Pleiadians were later on taken over by the Orion Collective as well. So they fell under the same but they are under the same pressure as the Sirian B's. The Sirian B's, though, have positioned themselves higher, being part of all of what we call the military projects. So they have got themselves a position. They are the ones in these silver suits with the snake as sigil on the left side of their, above the heart, so to speak, even though they don't have hearts. Whereas the Sirian A's, most of them have, since they had the TD technology, they were taken over and they have suffered along with it. And most of the Sirian A's have now become the energetic parasites, the elementals, the nagas, and everything that's connected to a cube, and sort of what we could say, dispose its original genetics as an elemental in the racial grids from where different types of energetic parasites can be produced. That's part of the alien inserted technology, and that's technically upholding the emotional field inside our reality field. Okay, so that's this will become clear when you do the transformative energy system, because there you understand why I'm talking about Sirians and Pleiadians, and why they play such a huge role in our makeup, because they were part of the two groups that worked under the restoration programs to fix the effect of the timeline event. So we could say all things come together. We are now in an intersection point where we begin something new, and with that little background, so you kind of have the context for what I'm saying here, it should also be very, very clear that the reality you're part of is artificial. It is a construction, therefore it's not natural, and therefore it will not exist forever. And since the sun has shut down, well, we are an evac that began this year. So the Earth is on evac as well. So that means the original reality fields are closing down as it did with the sun. And then everything will turn into kinetic processes under the timeline event energy dynamics, which means it will go into from order into entropy, from entropy into chaos, from chaos into decay, from decay into dustification, where there'll be nothing left. And I know science tells you that stars are brewed out of the dust of previous suns that have blasted, neutron stars, white dwarfs, what have you, that have exploded. They are gathering together in this spiral form, and by that new galaxies are created. But it's not like that. These galaxies and whatever's there with the black hole in the middle, everything will eventually be sucked into the black hole, and that's the abyss, the gates to the abyss. So that's just the last circulation of whatever needs to be burned out before it ceases to exist. It is not a nursery for new stars. It is not where things will grow into new universal structures. This is where everything meets its demise and its finalization and ceases to exist. And even though it lights and it gathers and it clusters, that's just the natural dynamics. Because a holographic field, you have the network with the holographic potentials or possibilities. You add in the radiation energies that sparks to life different code sequences that then begins to spiral. And as they spiral, they will also begin to create a vibration. And via the vibration, they will create that type of unit that is necessary to produce what we call molecular state. But if there's no consciousness imbued onto it, there will be no life force, because we are in the D14 collective cycles. There will be no life force. And if there's no life force, there's no life. So these galaxies, they are similar to the universal structures we had under the D13 collective, and the machine worlds and the technocrats and the dark ones, they can exist there because they don't thrive on life force. But they need the life force to keep themselves going inside our reality. If they would just stay stuck in the abyss or in the dark cycles, or would be part of the previous D13 universal structure, it would be no problem. And they are the matrix races, the And I call them the matrix races, even though we're here talking about a matrix of change, but I'll explain the difference there. It's just a mathematical feature that fits the holographic dynamics best. We could call it something else. We could call it a complex information system of holographic dynamics to instigate change within the holographic network of radiation, vibration, energy. So it's just easier to call it the matrix of change, right? Because people kind of, oh yeah, I get that one, instead of these long titles that most people will get very confused by before they even get to it. But that's part of the specificity of the minefield, to learn to be accurate in your terminology, so that when you work with words, you also work with energy. So it has a purpose, it has a meaning. But when we talk about these different groupings, the matrix, the parallel universal matrix races, they are engineering a new version of the LPU within the 13 collective energies. But they know it won't last for long, because everybody with the original viable genetics that are connected to the infinity cycles have moved on. And that means that while the D13 collective universal cycles, the 10 of them were still connected to the infinity cycles, they would still be fueled in the racial grids from the infinity cycles themselves. That is that type of life force. In these 12 cycles, we're supposed to learn to generate it ourselves and not be dependent on the infinity cycle. So you can see that's kind of where we get the idea with the source as the provider of the origin of what keeps people alive, as in the ruach that were blown into the nostrils of Adama, right? But this is where you understand the D13 collective. They need something to keep them alive. They need that breath of life that keeps them going. And that's why they are entering into ours. And that's why we assisted them in the LPU project to get them back into to the next cycles, where we would disconnect from the infinity cycles and begin to really push our individuality, not as just individual minds and forms in different spaces and in different sectors, which were the purpose of the previous universal cycles, but are moving it into where we learn to the full responsibility of what it means to be an individual, and by that thrive on our own, generate our own life force, or fall by the pole that we have cut. So that's the understanding of the next segment of the consciousness progression journey, is that we take the individuation a step further, where we disconnect from the infinity cycles, because as we get more and more complex, and more as we learned also from the previous universal cycles, we almost, the ones that were part of these wars, almost destroyed the infinity cycles, the consciousness potentials. They almost got to the core domains where they demolished everything, because they thought that if they could get their hands on that source of viability, then they would be the masters of that realm of these, the universal cycles. So you see how fucked up things can get when we have sort of what we call a source of viability that we are all connected to. And hence it was decided in this one, no, here we have what we have that is connected to our consciousness potentials and what we can transform of energy by our own. And if we can't do that, then there's the abyss. Then you'll get back to where you truly belong, because you have clearly not learned the lessons of how bad it can go when there is a raid of the core domains, which the D13 collective has done here as well, to get access to the new version of the infinity cycles, because that grows in viability and potentials as the consciousness potentials grow likewise. Whereas you could say the first infinity cycle that came from the previous universal cycle that completed were what we say raw potentials as units, because at some point, or consciousness units, because at some point everything has unfolded, everything there is to unfold, and then everything resets and begins all over, but on a completely new set of configuration where we then start all over again. So this is how it goes, and that's why there is no source as a personality structure or something that puts this in motion. This is all due to laws, and that's why we have constructions from previous civilizations, from earlier cycles, that still remains. The constructions, the universal constructions that we are traversing through and traveling through using the different sciences are engineered by very advanced races that came before us in earlier source cycles that ran in a different number sequence. So you see, there are some very complex dynamics behind everything that we are to learn to fully grasp the understandings of the next set of teachings that I'm giving you here. But here you kind of get the overview and see these as lectures as if you were attending some higher order academic faculty where me standing at the podium teaching you this. And you are the student that are studying this. If we were in the futures, you would see it holographically. I would not be talking. You would get it telepathically. You would get it as downloads. Your thoughts would be blasted up into a joint sphere in the middle of the room where these thoughts would be put into holographic trajectories, or what we call envision faculties, where your question would then get an answer from that sphere of information, as in if you had what would be the effects of that feature of that complex information system we're working with here, or that matrix of information that are put into the holographic network to instigate changes. What would that be? And the sphere would give it to you because it would calculate it like an enormously advanced computing mechanism. I'm deliberately not saying computer, but computing, calculating, sort of augmented, holographic, artificially constructed feature from which would communicate with you as well if you like, but not in words, not as a voice, but as feedback with information of, okay, this is how it would be. And you would do it on your own. You would not bother the teacher that would be talking about something else, showing new timelines, new code streams, new holographic features for the audience, which would then, by the questions and the holographic setup, get their answers directly and not disturb the teaching, the information stream for the rest of the students that were going in different directions. They would do the same thing with the same orbs or spheres of information, and they'll get their personal answers to what they need to understand to build their complex energy patterns from the information given by the instructor. And this is how you are to see these lectures, as in I'm giving you sets of information that are connected to the sciences of the reality field you're part of, but how you implement it and how you use it will be according to your energy system and how you're working with it in contemplation, which I explain what that is in the first course, the background of the new reality programs, which you find on my website. And here I will just share what I know, and then it's all up to you how you're going to work with these impressions of ideas and how you're going to utilize them according to your energy system and your mental capacity or your consciousness potentials. But it all comes down to information is given because the purpose is to transform energy. It is to upgrade the reality field you're part of to the highest purity rate, clearing it of the D13 collective energies to its highest standards, following the dynamics of the progressive races, and to the highest progression rate, following the laws of the reality field you're part of. So the D14 collective races work within laws and rules and principles, and we abide to these because we know that that's for the highest good of the many. We are not doing that. None of us are questioning these laws because we remember and we know that the D13 collective, they almost destroyed us all because they would not abide to the law. So if you are listening to this and you're getting all choked up with the laws, well, look for snakes and energetic parasites because you probably have some sit-over energy or consciousness potentials from the previous universal cycles that you still need to clear out and you need to learn to deal with. So with that one said, welcome to the whole Academy free online lecture, and we'll continue the next podcast. Thank you.